morning. We greatly appreciate the opportunity, the invitation to be able to come. We always love getting to come back to Tennessee. It's always a time where my wife, she's got family in the Clay County area, and the girls were up here, I think a few weeks ago, we were up here for a family reunion, so we always enjoy coming back. It's always good to be able to wear some orange and not have to justify it. I do live in a blue country, very much so it is good to be able to wear orange. I know there's some other orange colors and some crimson type colors here, but no one's perfect. We'll just put it that way. If you would turn in your Bibles to Job chapter 1. This morning we looked at in our Bible class time an example in Acts chapter 16. We were looking at a very important question: what must I do to be saved? We're going to kind of continue with this thought because that's all about faith. The looking for the faith, developing the faith. This morning we're going to talk about faith. This afternoon, we're going to talk just a little bit more about faith. But usually when we think about faith, Job is probably not the one that comes to mind. If we were talking about patience and perseverance, yes. But you think about it, Job exemplifies faith. And that's what we're going to look at for just a little bit this morning. When it was raining and pouring in Job's life, where did he turn? He relied on his faith. We think about all of the experiences that we have to deal with. We all face adversity. We all have heartache. We all have trouble. It's immune to this. We have things we have to deal with. We may yet have to suffer. But we think about other people and what they have dealt with. We think about especially what Job is dealing with the adversity, the heartache, the grief, the suffering. We have the Bible that describes many of these different things and people with problems. I was a police officer once upon a time, and a guy I worked with, he claimed that as police officers we were just people helping people, is what he said. Now, he would tell people that when he was taking them to jail, but it's people helping people. And we think about it, and people have problems. We have to deal with these problems. We have to get over these problems and find a solution when we face adversity. And it's always good to have a solution. It's really easy to point out where it's like, well, this is a problem right here. I don't know what to do with it. Let's just think about this problem and kind of kick it around a little bit. We have to find solutions. The Bible gives us solutions to many of these problems on dealing with all of these different things because we're no different. We're going to have different things that pop up in our life. Sometimes we're even going to have a circumstance that's very unfortunate. And it's going to be added on top of another unfortunate circumstance and another unfortunate circumstance. And how do we deal with it? When they all come in bunches, how do we deal with it? It can be absolutely overwhelming. Let's consider Job for just a few minutes. In Job chapter 1, beginning at verse 13, if you'd like to follow along with me. I'm reading out of the New King James Version this morning. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, when the Sabaeans raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and said, a fire from God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels, took them away, yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Can you put yourself in Job's shoes? Can you try to imagine putting yourself in Job's shoes here? All of the experiences that he has had to deal with, that he is enduring from this point in time that we read in the text, how could he continue on? Let's look at how he continue on. But to better understand the how he's able to do this, let's look a little bit about his background. We see the background here. There we go. If you go to the first part of the chapter, we are given a little bit of information about who Job is. We're told that Job is come from the land of Uz. He was upright. He was blameless. It does not say he was sinlessly perfect, but he was upright. He was blameless. He was righteous. He feared God. He honored God. He revered God. It says he eschewed evil, that he shunned it. He hated it. He refuted it. He was not going to give himself over to evil. He stood for what was right. He didn't want anything to do with evil. He was telling of Job's faith, is what this is telling us about. This is showing a little bit about Job's faith. What kind of man he was. What kind of character Job was. But it's interesting, the Bible just doesn't stop there when describing Job. The Bible is even going to go further and tell us a little bit about Job's family and his finances. You know, I've met many people since we've been up here since yesterday. One of the things that we did not do, we didn't exchange bank account information. You know, do you do that when you meet someone on the street? Do you say, "Hi, my name is so-and-so. This is how much this is what my assets are. This is what my portfolio looks like." We don't do that, do we? But the Bible tells us a little bit about Job's family and his finances. He had a very fine family. He had 7 sons. He had 3 daughters. He had a great household. He had servants. He was a man of substance. He enjoyed prosperity. God thought he was the richest and greatest, wealthiest in the East. Job was faithful. Verse 5 tells us that he did regularly. This is talking about his service. He was not sporadic. He was continuing in his service. But you look at verse 8. As we're leading up to verse 8, here comes this other entity. You go back to verse 6, or verse 7, it tells us, here comes Satan. Where'd you come from? Where do you come from? The Lord asked him. Satan said, "I'm going back and forth, to and fro." He's looking. Satan is on the prowl. And in verse 8, this is what God has said to Satan. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil." Job's life is perfect right now, right? You know, the children are enjoying each other's company. It makes me think of just one big happy family. Everything's going well, but trouble's brewing. All is good. Here comes Satan, and Satan does what he does best. He's on the prowl. He is relentless. He is restless. We see many of these characteristics of Satan back in Genesis chapter 3 with Eve. We see it as we already read once this morning in Job chapter 1, verses 13 through 19. He's attacked Job. At this point in our text in verse 8, he's just about to attack Job's faith, his family, his finances. Satan thinks that Job does not truly believe in God. He thinks that, if that hedge is removed, he will run away from God. And God gives Satan the opportunity to do what he needs to Job. Don't take his life. That's the one rule. And we see what has happened. We look at Job's afflictions. You look at verse 13, 14, and 15. Here comes the messenger. Your oxen were plowing. The donkeys were feeding beside you in the field, and here comes these Sabaeans. They've came in. They've wreaked havoc. They have taken. They have killed. They are doing Satan's will. And this one messenger is alone left to tell of it. Here comes messenger number 2. Now at this point in time, I'd be a little bit, radars are going off for me at this point. The second messenger comes, and before Job could catch his breath, while he was yet speaking, this messenger, fire has fallen from heaven, from God. It's burned up your sheep. It's killed your shepherds. And I am the only one left to tell you. Verse 17 says, before he could catch his breath again, at this point in time, I think I'd run away. At the very least, I'd probably put my fingers in my ears. I can't hear you. This third messenger has come and said, the Chaldeans have come. They formed 3 bands, 3 groups. They've stolen your camel. They've killed your servants. And I'm the only one left to tell you. Think about what's happening at this point in time. From a materialistic standpoint, from a financial standpoint, Job is wiped out. You talk about an instant recession. You talk about an instant depression. Job's in it. He's lost his livelihood. He's lost everything that he has as far as his prosperity and his substance goes. Someone might ask at this point in time, can it get any worse? Oh, I've had wiser and older people in my life. My grandfather would hammer this sometimes literally into my head. Boy, never ask if it can get worse. Because he always taught me that it can. My daddy would tell us that. He still tells us this. It can always be worse. The worst is about to come for Job. The worst is right on the out front before Job could catch his breath again. This messenger comes, tells him, your children were in their brother's house. They're enjoying each other's company. Here comes a strong wind. It's blown the house down. They're all dead. Not lost a child. Meaning, I'm sure there's people in here who have lost a child. I can't imagine dealing with that. I really can't. He didn't lose one. He lost all 10. Everything that this man has, his prosperity, his things, now his family, gone. How would we deal? Job has literally been bombarded with a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe on top of a huge tragic event. How can he endure? How can he stand firm? We go back to his faith, back to his background. There's some principles of dealing with the adversity, with grief, and the hard times that we're about to see beginning here in verse 20. Job's worship. When Job heard these things, it says he arose. It's not like Job went over and found somewhere to sit down or recline. It doesn't mean he got up from a reclined position. What Job did, this is this is showing that he has taken action. Sometimes when bad things happen, what do we want to do? Sometimes when bad things happen, we don't want to do anything. Inactivity. Let's just sit and mellow and deal with it. But Job took action. Other parts of the Bible go to explain what Job's actions were. He tore his robe. He shaved his head. This is an emotional response. Do we not deal with things from an emotional response sometimes? Yeah, we do. The feeling of grief that he was dealing with, overwhelming grief, probably is a better way to put it. The overwhelming grief that he's dealing with, probably right now, if it was me, I would be 100% an emotional wreck. And many of you would probably be in the same boat. More questions than answers. But Job fell to the ground and he worshiped God, the Creator. What a better way to deal with bad things than to focus on God. After all the bad news, the negative news, the disheartening news, he humbles himself to God. He worships God. The adversity did not drive Job away from God. It drove him towards God. It made him closer with God. Job understood some things. Job understood who the greatest source of hope and comfort is. And that's in God. It's not in anyone in particular. It's not in any person, not any man. It's not in anything. It is truly in God. Job understood this, and we see how Job understands this and how he's dealing with this. All of these sudden losses that he's been subjected to, these horrible things, he still thought God was worthy to be praised. And truly He is. God was still just. God was still merciful. What would we have thought? What would we have done? One of my first instructors, when I began preaching school, I was taking some classes online. I went and took a few classes with the Georgia School of Preaching. The very first instructor I had, I didn't know it at the time. I was talking with the director in the next class a couple of weeks after that. It was a one-on-one class. We talked via Zoom and phone calls and emails and text messages. I found out later I had the book that he had written on hope. And in the back of the book, he was talking about his wife who passed away. And I asked the director about this. And he said that his wife had passed suddenly. And this was, I think, on a Thursday. You know where this man was on Sunday? He wasn't in the pulpit ministry anymore. But on Sunday morning, he was teaching a Bible class. after he preached his wife's funeral on Saturday. And I'm not saying that to blow his ego, and many of you probably have done very similar. But we see people like this from time to time, dealing with the adversity, dealing with heartache, dealing with grief. Having bad times still puts God first. Still chooses to serve God first and foremost. Living the principles of Matthew 6 and verse 33. Having bad times, being faithful to God still striving to draw near to God. Sometimes when bad things happen to us as people, we become MIA, missing in action, don't we? I'm not saying you, I'm saying we as a people. We can become this missing in action and be like, well, bad things are happening, I got to take a step back. We allow the pain to draw us away from God. Sometimes, if we have facing trials and tribulation, sometimes we want to start asking questions, demanding of God, why did you do this to me? Why is this happening to me? Sometimes we do that. Sometimes we allow the grief and the heartache and the bad things to draw us away from God. Folks, what is the greatest thing that we can do in bad times? The greatest help during troubling times? Job understood it. Reverent, consistent worship. That's what Job did. Think about what we've done already this morning. You know, we've come together. We have studied a portion of God's Word. We have come around the table of remembrance this morning. We've come to worship God. We're gathering with other saints. We're gathering with other like-minded people. Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. We're considering one another to provoke unto stimulate love and good works. We're exhorting one another. We are encouraging one another with our presence. We've sang songs. Colossians 3:16, we are letting the word of Christ dwell in us richly. We're singing these songs, making melody in our hearts. When dealing with pain, we can do these things with pain and still have the joy of rejoicing in Christ. Worshiping, singing, remembering as we gather around the Lord's table, remembering that sacrifice for us. Remembering that one day there's no more tears. One day, there's no more pain, no more heartache, no more death. All because of Christ. Job understood these things. He understood the blessings. Look at verse 21. Job 1, verse 21. He said, this is what Job has said now. He's responded, naked and I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Naked when he came into this world, he had nothing. When we come into this world, we've got nothing. We don't have material things, do we? When we leave this world, we do not have material things. He understood the concept of what Paul was writing to Timothy about, did he not? 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 7 and 8, or 6 and 7. With godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. There are many people today that don't hold to this. I know of a family who this man really enjoyed money, and he had money. When he was buried, when he died and he was buried, they put $1 million check in his casket with him. What is that good is that doing? Many people, we try to hold stuff. We want stuff. We have to get our stuff. Because we can be consumed with things in our life, things that we value, things that we treasure. You know, I like guns. I have some, several, whatever. But I like them. We went to polishing the pulpit last year. I'm going to tell on myself. Usually there's a gun with me in pretty close proximity. We went to the atrium singing on a Sunday night. We got in. The girls were tired. Bella was very irritated. She was 4. She was sleepy. We've been at the convention center all day long. A little bit hungry. Had my arms loaded. And I thought I left the gun in the center console. Can't take the gun in the convention center. So I left it in the center console. Thought I locked the door. Apparently I did not. Went out the next morning. And I was going to get the gun, take it in the room. And I didn't have the keys with me, but the door opened. I look in the center console, gun's gone. I hadn't had that gun 3 weeks. I had it customized. I had a trigger job done to it. I had sights on it. I had a $200 holster that I've been saving up for this gun. I really liked it. I paid my stupid tax. Gun's gone. Still don't have the gun back. I had to file a police report. I don't know how many theft of property reports I took as a police officer. Thousands, probably. And I told people, do not leave those things in your car. What did I do? I left those things in my car, and it was taken away. Did I lose my mind? I was upset. I didn't lose my mind. If we lose our stuff sometimes, we can lose our minds. And to the point that we put our souls in jeopardy. Remember what the principles that Jesus taught in Matthew chapter 6. Beginning with verse 19. Did he say lay up for yourselves treasures on earth? No. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust cannot corrupt, where thieves cannot break in and steal. He says right the opposite there in the early part of verse 19. Don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, because things can corrupt, things can be destroyed, things can be stolen. Job understood these blessings in his life. He understood that everything comes. Did James not say every good and perfect gift comes from above? Not on things that we have. He understood that the Lord gave, the Lord's taken away. Job was understanding these things. He was putting these things into action. God gave them, makes them God's to begin with, does it not? This is not anybody's stuff. When Lily was about 1.5 years old, she's 9 now, there were some words that when she was little, I can't wait for my kids to start talking. And then as they started talking, it's one of the first things that she said every day. And it wasn't because Jessica and I had taught her this word or what it meant. My brother, who's about 16, 18 months younger than I am, he taught her the word mine. Everything was mine. Every toy, everything that we touched, mine. And he thought it was hilarious. He's getting payback. He's got twin girls who are 6 now. And he's got a 2-year-old. And he's got another on the way. There's payback coming. But we can become like little children sometimes. Everything becomes my stuff, my abilities, my talents, my life. Can we say those things from time to time? We need to remember who blesses us with everything that we have. God gave it. Everything in the world, the psalmist talks about it, Psalm 24 and verse 1. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. In Psalm chapter 50 and verse 10, every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle upon 1,000 hills. If I were hungry, I would not tell thee, for the world is mine and the fullness thereof. Everything belongs to God. And since these are God's to begin with, it is well within His power, well within His authority to take them away, to withdraw it, to allow it to be taken away. Since He gave it to begin with, Job understood this. Job was living this. In all these things, look at verse 22, Job 1. In all this, Job did not sin, nor charge God with wrong. He didn't sin. He didn't charge God foolishly. It was literally raining and pouring bad things in Job's life. But he did not sin. He did not act foolish. He did not allow the grief and the sorrow as an excuse to sin, to transgress God's law. Sometimes we want to ask ourselves the question, why? Why is this happening? Maybe we want to get to the point of demanding answers from God, thinking we deserve this. There was a point in time in Job's life where Job decided he needed to ask God some questions. If you would hold your here in Job chapter 1, flip back to the latter part of Job, Job 38. Job had a time at one point in his life when all of his, quote unquote, his 3 friends came. And that maybe caused some additional problems for Job. But at one point, Job wanted an answer. God never gave the answer Job was looking for. God had some questions for Job. Job 38, those first 2 verses. The Lord answered Job out of a whirlwind. And this is what God said. Who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Uh-oh. Job has just done something that he's not would probably want to do again. Who is this who darkens? Job knows he's in for it. Job called God out. God has responded. In verse 3, Now prepare yourself like a man, the New King James Version says. I will question you, and you shall answer me. I love the 1901 American Standard Version of this. Gird up now thyself like a man, loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. He's about to get his answer. Verse 4 begins it. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the world? Job wanted to know, why is this going on? God answers, where were you when I created the world? Any of us in this room, can we create a universe? I don't see any hands going up. We can't. God can. Questions to Job here. Teaches Job a lesson. It teaches us a lesson when we go back and read and study. We continue to read these series of questions. It goes on for some time. Question after question after question that God has given to Job. Job, comparatively to God's wisdom, nothing. God has the infinite wisdom. But in our limited understanding and limited wisdom of the power of God, how are we to question God? Job learned some things. He understood some things. Despite what we see, despite what we suffer, we must trust in the Lord with every fiber of our very being. We cannot lean on our own understanding, Proverbs 3, verse 5. Not on our own reasoning, not on our own intellect, not on our own education or experiences, but in all our ways, in every way, we acknowledge God. That's what we're supposed to do. That is the intentions of this. This is what Job has learned, maybe the hard way. When hard times came to Job, he did not sin. When hard times come to us, maybe you're here this morning, maybe you are dealing with a hard time right now. It's very likely. Maybe dealing with heartache and maybe dealing with various griefs and sorrows. When hard times come our way, and if they're not right now, they're going to, they will. Can we use things like grief and sorrow and heartache and troubles as an excuse? I've heard many people say this. Well, I'm dealing with this, but God understands because I'm about to do something that God does not want me to do. Is that biblical? No, 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 it's not. God understands it. He knows what we're dealing with, but that is not an excuse and a license to sin. When is it okay to ever put God on the back seat? When is it ever okay not to worship God, not to put God first, not to come and participate in Bible class and in worship service, not to come to encourage one another, not to come to participate? There's never a good time. There's never a good time to disobey God and think, well, God understands it because I'm dealing with some problems. It's not the case. We all hurt, we all cry. But we still put God and His kingdom first in our life. There's never a good time, right in the eyes of God, to disobey Him. Even during adversity and pain and grief and heartache, if we let go of God, if we transgress God's law, if we sin, if we defy His laws, you know what? We curse Him, Satan wins. That's what he thought Job was going to do. He thought, move all these hedges, make these things happen, and this is what's going to happen. Job is going to fold. It was raining and pouring in his life. He will just quit. But he didn't. It was raining and pouring, and he didn't stop. My dad is, we used to watch college football on Saturday afternoons, and he would what I would call a fair weather fan. He was for whoever was winning at the time. And at that time, it was a weird orange color in Florida that was winning. And for an orange and white fan, that was horrible. But he was a fair weather fan because as soon as they started losing, he jumped on the Tide bandwagon and he's jumped on the Bulldog bandwagon. And whoever's winning at the time is who he was a fan of. Folks, we cannot do that with God. We cannot be a fair weather friend to God. Satan accused Job of being this fair weather follower of God. He says this to God, but yet Job held true. Job proved that he was not. But, question time for us, what about us? Are we a fair weather friend to God? Through bad times, through good times even. If we were in Job's shoes, what would we have done? If we were in Job's shoes, would we have worshiped? Or would we have run away? Maybe we would have denounced our faith. Some have done that. Maybe we would have wavered in our faith. Maybe we would have subjected ourselves to sin. Folks, this is encouragement for us. Studying portions as this here we have in Job's life can be encouragement to us that we are to love God in good times. We serve God in good times. We serve God in better times. We serve God even in the bad times. We have to have this faith developed in our life, even when we don't understand. There's a lot of things that goes on in this world I don't understand. Things that happened yesterday on a national level, I don't understand it. Things that happen every single day in private life, sometimes I don't understand it. When it rains, when it pours, where are we looking for refuge? Where are we looking for the help and the comfort and the encouragement to make it through with God's help? In Matthew chapter 11, a very familiar passage, Jesus tells us exactly where we should be looking. Matthew 11, beginning with verse 28, I'll read this and the lesson is yours. This is what Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Are we looking to Jesus? Are we looking to Jesus for everything that we have, for everything that we need, to everything that we deal with on a daily basis? Do we look to Jesus? If you're here this morning, maybe you've never obeyed the gospel. Why not do that right now? What a better time than right now to start your week off knowing and making sure that everything is right, that your heart is right with God, that you have come to complete obedience to God's Word. You can do that. We can help you with that this morning. Maybe you're here this morning, though. Maybe you are a Christian. Maybe you've taken those steps. Hear, believe, repent, confess, be baptized. That's how we become a Christian. We live faithfully until death. That can be difficult because we're not perfect. Maybe if that's you today, make sure that your heart is right with God. If you need to respond and to rededicate your life to Christ again, to make sure that everything is good in your heart, you're good in the sight of God, that you have not sinned, that you have not fell short of that, because we do sometimes. Maybe it's something that you just need the encouragement to help get through another week. It'll be a hot week. I'm sure the campers are going to have a hot week. I hope y'all have got air conditioning. But don't take another day. Don't say, well, maybe next week. Maybe tonight. There's a lot of people here right now. Maybe later. Don't wait. We don't know what tomorrow holds. If you need to respond to the invitation, it's always open. But at this point in time, if you need to respond, we're happy to help however we can. Won't you come as we go, we stand and as we sing.